Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Oxford if you are not local, and to this wonderful celebration of Wildflower Meadows hosted by the North Wall. I'm Nikki and I run the gallery at the Arts Centre. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this evening, and a big thank you obviously to Elaine Kazimierczuk and Jules from Plantlife for agreeing to host this webinar with us. Northwall's been working with Elaine for over a year now, a little bit accidentally, I guess, because it was actually this time last year when she was supposed to have a show with us for Art Weeks in the gallery, and obviously that was postponed, and we spent a lot of time planning. And then she devised a wonderful project called the Paint My Meadow project, which you'll hear about, which was a series of paintings that the North Wall showed digitally over the summer. And now finally, her live real exhibition at the North Wall, as well as her real life Wildflower Meadows in the gallery, all there from the 17th of May. So please do come and visit. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we start. Elaine and Jules will in a moment be in discussion for about 45 minutes, and the chat function is disabled, but in the 5-minute break that follows, you will be able to submit your questions to the Q&A function on the webinar. We'll have a quick break, so stretch your legs, submit your questions, go get a drink. We won't start while you're away, but we will start 5 minutes later with the Q&A session, and that will last half an hour, and we should be done by 8:15. Elaine has a wonderful connection with Plantlife that she's fostered over the last couple of years, and we're delighted that Jules has agreed to join us this evening. So without any further delay, I would like to hand over to Elaine and Jules.
Hello. Hello. Hi, Elaine. Hello. Hi. I'm Elaine. I'm an artist, a painter, and I mostly paint the natural world, and I've done a lot of meadows recently, but I haven't always been an artist. It's taken me quite a long time to get where I am now, although I'm not really surprised that things have worked out the way they are, with the natural world and art coming together, sort of merging and sort of synergistically in what I do. Because I've always had an interest in the natural world, and I've always wanted to be an artist, but my school, Queen Elizabeth's Grammar School for Girls, thought otherwise, and I was put in the A stream, and I was delighted about that. But when you were in the A stream, you had to drop art and take Latin because you were going to go to university, weren't you? And you know, art just wasn't respected, and it certainly wasn't thought of as a viable career. So there I was, growing up in a mining town from a very working class household, no exposure to the world of art. We had music appreciation at school, but we didn't have any visual art appreciation, and there were no galleries in Mansfield apart from the museum. I went to my first proper contemporary art exhibition in 1971. It was Bridget Riley at the Hayward Gallery, and I just thought it was fantastic. I thought, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. But by then, I'd already accepted a place at university to study science. And, you know, my teacher said, get yourself a good qualification. You'll never make a living out of art. And it was very persuasive because, you know, there was no money at home. We were pretty poor. So I went on to do to study science, and I did actually keep in touch with the natural world. I taught environmental science for several years, but I never studied art formally. However, whilst I was a science student, I used to hop over to the Faculty of Art across the road from the science block, and I met this sculptor while I was there. Anyway, long story short, we got married several years later. We were together for over 20 years, and I used to help him. So I got my art education vicariously, you might say. We had 2 children, but I was the one with the steady job. And so you see, my teachers weren't wrong, were they? Anyway, fast forward a few decades, in 2014, I got a chance to quit the day job, retire a few years early, and got my freedom. So I was able to devote myself to painting. People ask, why landscapes? Well, for me, it's a perfect combination of art and nature. My family didn't have a car. We didn't go on exotic holidays, but we did most weekends go for walks in the countryside. And so we would go out there looking for wildflowers and butterflies. My father was a keen butterfly collector. I mean, he wouldn't do it these days, but then they were just so abundant, and we didn't catch many anyway. So off we'd go with our observers' books of wildflowers and observers' books of butterflies and things. And you know, it was fantastic. In the autumn, of course, it was all about mushrooms. You ask any Pole about mushrooms. But I remember the meadows of my childhood. I mean, they were just carpeted with harebells and toad's flax and there were clouds of butterflies. I remember walking through road verges, absolutely waist high, with campion and cranesbill and things. And you know, at the time I just took it all for granted. Well, you would as a child, wouldn't you? But you know, later on I started to see things change. I learned that all of this was in danger because I witnessed with my very eyes, you know, hedgerows being ripped up, factory farming, and so I became interested in conservation and wildlife management. And I've done some volunteer work for wildlife organisations, and also for I did some consultancy work for an NGO. Obviously, you can imagine that I'm a keen supporter of rewilding, because I think that we've got to find a way where wildlife can thrive alongside human habitation, because I'm desperately concerned about habitat loss and the imminent extinction of species. However, I'm fortunate because I still have access to the countryside close at hand, where I can make sketches and take photos. And it was when I was researching meadows to go and sketch that I came across Plantlife's work. And I knew that the habitats were in danger and fast disappearing. Jules will tell you more about this later. I was absolutely shocked. And so I thought, I've got to do something to help. So I got in touch, and it just turned out that Jules got back to me and said there was a charity auction in 2019, a big, for their 30th anniversary. So I was able to donate a couple of paintings, and fortunately they were able to flog them. So I've been supporting them ever since, and banging on about Plantlife whenever I can, like now. Anyway, things have come full circle, really. The two things I'm passionate about, painting and the natural world, they both come together in my work, and it's great. But last year, of course, as Nikki was saying, my trips to wildflower reserves had to be cancelled because I couldn't make my journeys. Just as you know, meadows were coming into bloom, we went into lockdown. So I got the meadows to come to me. In fact, it was a friend who came up with the idea of Paint My Meadow. He suggested this, you know, he said, set up a social media group and get people, use this hashtag Paint My Meadow, and get people to send you photos of their local meadows when they're going on their sort of their early exercise. Of course, it's not the same as the magical experience of being in a meadow, but on the plus side, I got photos from all over the UK and from abroad as well. In fact, I got one from Australia, so I had to paint that one because that was a bit special. And of course, Plantlife provided some images. They provided one of Ranscombe Farm poppies. So that was it was a good project. But I did get to visit some plant life reserves prior to this. I went to Jones Hill Farm in Herefordshire in 2019, and this is a fantastic reserve. There's over 40 acres of wildflower meadow there, and it's absolutely carpeted with these common spotted orchids. It was just pinky mauve when I went there. And I've made a large painting of this meadowland because big issues deserve big paintings. It's about 7 meters long, this of Jones Hill Farm. And I've done another 7-meter panorama for the North Wall exhibition, but that one's of the Oxford Botanic Gardens. This one here is this goes out to various offices and boardrooms and things for rental, so it gets out onto people's walls. Also at the North Wall, I'm going to install some wildflower meadow, real living meadow, if I can keep it alive for that long. Wildflower Turf, the company, very kindly donated 15 square meters of living turf. There it is, arriving at my house, and it comes in this big sort of layer cake thing, and all you do is you separate the slices and lay them out, and then just add water, and ta-da, wildflower meadow. So I'm growing it at the moment. Transporting it to the gallery is going to be interesting, but we'll see. There'll be a strip of meadow all the way around the North Wall gallery. I did think of putting a big meadow in the middle, but it would take up too much space, and with social distancing, people need to occupy the whole room. So we're going to have it round the edge. And there'll be some little meadows, mini meadows, to give away to people who buy painting. So, or maybe I'll buy a meadow and get a free painting. I don't know. Anyway, okay, Jules, I think you want to ask me something about my meadow inspiration.
Indeed, when we were thinking about this webinar, we thought when we first started working together, and it seems like we've been working for forever, but it is only 2018, so it's 3 years. But yes, I remember when your inquiry came in, and we went to your website and had a look at your work, and we were just blown away by your amazing artistic endeavours, and we continue to be so to this day. And I think you're a little bit coy about your 2 amazing paintings that you did for us for the auction, because obviously one of them was based on our reserves as well, and they flew in the auction and raised money to go towards our work. So I think you're a little bit understated in your comments there, but yes, obviously, you know, you've continued to do paintings for us based on our work, and we receive donations off the back of them, and you are such a huge advocate of everything we do. So we love working with you, Elaine, and long may it continue. And we're very pleased you became an artist and moved away from being a teacher. So you've obviously talked about nature. It's obviously so ingrained in you from those days of your observer books, and we've all got those tatty little copies that we had when we were little. But really, why does nature inspire artwork? Where does it come from? Is it so deep ingrained in you?
Yeah, I'd say it is. I mean, as I said, my family, we always used to go walking in the woods. And I think when it's something you grow up with, it sort of becomes part of you. But, you know, nature never ceases to inspire me and fascinate me. I mean, it's not just the variety of things, it's the complexity of them. I mean, you couldn't make it up, the audacity of it, you know, camouflage and mimicry. An insect pretending to be a plant, you know, a stick insect that looks like a leaf, or a plant pretending to be an insect, a bee orchid trying to look like a bee, you know, it's just amazing. And the way they've evolved to work together in an interconnected way, you know, the way ecosystems work. I just love it. And you know, if I can get that into my paintings, then I, you know, job done. But a friend of mine said that my paintings captured the wild assemblage of natural beauty, and I really like that expression, and I hope that that's what I'm doing, because I want to communicate, you know, the beauty of nature through my paintings. You know, so I get out locally to paint whatever I can, really.
So on that note, if we've got people watching in Oxfordshire, where would you recommend they go? Where have you taken inspiration or painted?
Well, I'm very fortunate. There's lots of places, but I could just mention a few. There's Wildflower Meadows, where there are floodplains, and it's just the right habitat for snake's head fritillaries, which are one of my top favourites. I think it's Oxfordshire's favourite flower, apparently. And then very close to where I'm living at the moment, down Binsey Lane, around Medley Farm, where you can go and buy your asparagus, just coming into season. There's fields of buttercup meadows. They'll be out in about a month's time. And it's just yellow as far as the eye can see. It's fantastic. And then another place that I've used many times is Oxford Botanic Gardens. I'm a member of the Botanic Gardens, and I like to go to James Hitchmuth's Merton Borders. They're not wild as such, although they were planted from seed. But it's an example of sustainable horticulture, where he's created a rich diversity of species. So it's very similar to the natural environment.
They're all absolutely stunning, aren't they?
It's fantastic. I love it. I go time and time again. I made lots of paintings of them. Jules, right now, boring lawns are blossoming into magnificent Monet-looking creations. I would say that, wouldn't I? But I think meadows are having a bit of a moment, although I don't think there's any going back. I don't think it's just a gardening trend like purple decking and things. I think it's more significant than that. I think we're sort of resetting our connection with nature, and there's a new aesthetic appreciation. You know, we don't expect tidy grass, swathes of grass anymore. And I think over the past year, with people staying local, I think they've seen what's on their doorstep, quite literally, you know, pavement plants and road verges coming into blossom once the council tractor mowers had to stop. You know, Plantlife's campaigns seem to have helped people think differently about our landscape. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about these campaigns and how you manage habitats for wider benefits.
Yes, I mean, lockdown, as awful as it was great for wildlife, for wildflowers. It had many positives, including for people's well-being. Ironically, being forced to stay local, people discovered places that they hadn't realised had existed or hadn't visited for years. So, I mean, really, you mentioned about we were 30 a couple of years ago. So we started in 1989, and our big concern then was meadows. And as you discovered when you first found us, we do own rather a lot of meadows, and quite a lot of our work is around meadows. And at that time when we started, the urgent need was to buy up as much meadowland as possible before it was completely lost. So sadly, in this country, we've now lost 97% of our meadowland, which is an awful statistic. And we try to kind of keep that 3% that's left, as well as creating new meadow spaces. Luckily in 1989, that kind of land was quite cheap, and we formed a relationship with Timotei. Do you remember the gorgeous lady with the blonde hair who skipped through meadows? So ironically, we were around at the same time as their advertising campaign, and they kindly gave us some funding to buy some pockets of meadows. And whilst wildlife trusts had the same idea and had started buying meadows as well, we were able to buy some smaller pockets that were at risk. And really the big issue was around farming. It's changed radically in this country, and we've gone to quite a monoculture. We've gone to pesticides and herbicides. As you mentioned, we've taken out hedgerows, and that meadow setting was just disappearing under intensive agriculture, which I think we're starting to see a return back to more traditional ways of farming. But yeah, so we ended up with quite a lot of meadows in our ownership, and that was really a focus, and continues to be. But now we tend to work more in partnership with people. We work on public and private land, and encourage people to look after the meadows they've got, to improve them, but also to regenerate land back into meadows, and also to create meadows as well. From, quite often we use green hay, which is where we've taken seeds from existing traditional meadows and transplanted them locally into new spaces. So there's still this massive focus. So in that first sort of 10-year period, we acquired about 460 acres of meadow, and we've just added to that over the years. You've mentioned floodplain meadows. They're classic, one of our sites that we've got. But also we took on peat bogs that were at risk of intensive stripping. So we ended up with 3,000 acres in the north of Scotland. We took on limestone pavements in the Yorkshire Dales, so incredibly windswept, completely different habitats to a meadow setting indeed, with their sort of all the wild plants in the little crevices between all the little tiny gaps. And then we took on farm spaces, so a lot of our reserves still operate as farming spaces. They have grazing, or we have tenant farmers on there that help manage, but we manage in the more traditional way to try and conserve what we've got in terms of those wild plants. And you mentioned mushrooms early, so it's not just wildflowers, it's fungi and lichens as well that we're also I mean, I was just looking at some of the list. We've got our flagship reserve in Kent called Ranscombe, which is literally next door to a motorway. You couldn't get much closer. And also the Channel Tunnel rail link as well goes right past the side of it. But you can find Venus looking glass and broadleaf cudweed and all these, you know, really evocative names of wonderful wild plants. But then our meadows work continues. We started to get really known for that, and as part of the coronation, we were invited to set up a Coronation Meadows project, and by 2016 we'd actually created 90 new meadows, and the last one was actually inner city London. So it isn't just a rural creation, it's trying to get meadows into spaces possible wherever we possibly can. And you can go to our website and look at our current meadows work, what we're doing. But also you mentioned road verges, and those last year were just amazing, because as you said, the cutters were not able to come out every 2 weeks and just strip them. So people had orchids popping up on verges outside their houses. They had no idea what they were. And people were just, wow, what, you don't need to seed a verge, because this is what sits in the seed bed if you don't mow it all the time. So we're working with lots of councils and council contractors to really look at how they manage the verges by cutting less, cutting at certain times of year to allow these wildflowers and the wild plants to bloom, which then brings in the wildlife as well. And it makes people happy. You know, would you rather drive along and see something like this, or would you rather drive along and see sort of a dusty bowl of grass that's just been cut within an inch of its life? So we run a road verge campaign. Again, it's all on our website, and people can sign up, and they're encouraged to support their local councils to change the management practices so that we can see things like this. And then if you're in your garden, we encourage you to cut your grass less, you know, get involved in no mow May. Good excuse to sit in the garden and not get your lawnmower out and see what pops up. And also we do lots of citizen science projects as well. So you can count the flowers in your lawns and work out what you've got and what wildlife it supports. So we started at meadows. We've got lots of different habitats we work with, but meadows is still such a central thing to what we do indeed. So meadows, we've kind of talked about them. I think we both think they're amazingly evocative places. They are just filled with life, not just wildflowers. So when you've been out to these meadows, what does it feel like to you because I know what it feels like to me to be in a meadow. So what's it like for you?
Well, how does it feel? It's difficult for me to put into words, so I guess that's why I try to put it into my paintings. But I'll give it a bash. When I'm in a meadow, it's not just the visual experience, the flowers and the grasses. It's a much more multisensory experience than that, and it's an awareness of, as I said before, the full ecosystem. I'm aware of everything going on, going about its business, and it's so purposeful and busy, but at the same time it's calming. And you mentioned the benefits for people's mental health of getting outside into nature. For me, without getting too, fancy about it, I think it sort of recalibrates where I fit in as part of the natural world. And during lockdown, many people have reconnected with this, with a more wild and more natural world. And I think there's a revived desire to live alongside nature. You mentioned no mow May, and it can even be done in urban settings, can't it? Mini orchards and towns and cities. I think rewilding is can take on all sorts of forms. I don't think it's just longhorn cattle and in the Scottish Highlands and things, and forestation and things. I think it can be quite small scale, and it all. I think you've got a saying, isn't it? Every flower counts or something.
Every flower counts, indeed.
Yeah. So Jules, can you tell us a bit more about how meadows are managed, and can somebody create a mini meadow at home in their own garden?
Yes, or an art gallery, as you're discovering. So one. Yes, so I think it probably is easier if we start with kind of what is a meadow, because to people that aren't botanists, and I'm not a botanist, it's what is it? So it's basically a piece of pasture that is left ungrazed through the growing season. So the field, etc., doesn't have any cattle on it, and the wild plants, the wildflowers, are allowed to bloom, flower, and go to seed. And at that point, then it's cut, and we take the sweet hay off, or we take the seed off and transplant elsewhere. And then cattle would come on to graze probably until sort of the beginning of winter, and then it would be rested again to allow the wildflowers to come back through. And that's the traditional way that you would do it. You might also hear the word pasture, which is the same. And that's also an area where you can end up with a really botanically rich land. In that case, the hay isn't taken off, but it just means the grazing animals keep things like small trees at bay. So it allows it to stay as a grassland rather than turning into a completely wild situation where the wildflowers are all sort of crowded out by more thuggish plants. But yes, mini meadows at home. You can start with a pot in the garden and just put some wildflower seeds in. Wildflowers like rubbish soil, so you just don't need to do anything with it. Don't give it any love, don't give it any attention. Pop some seeds in, or clear a small area in your garden that you've got, and again put down some seeds. You can come to us. We've created lots of lovely little seed mixes you can use. You've mentioned wildflower turf, so if you want a more instant result, clear the area, get your turf, roll it out, give it lots of love in terms of watering, and you'll get these beautiful blooms, and then you've got a permanent meadow that's in your garden space. But also, you've got the no mow May, so anyone who's got any grass has actually already potentially got a mini meadow in their garden. So you can either mow it less and see what crops up. You can tightly mow some areas and leave other areas to go wild. In our garden, we create some strips, and then we leave some areas where we don't mow at all for months upon end. And the amount of bees and butterflies and things that come to you is absolutely amazing. So whether you've just got a pot on a balcony, or whether you've got a little bit more space, you've got lots of different options to have your own little mini meadow, and experience what it feels like, and how the local wildlife love you for it, basically. But moving on from gardens, can we go to something much bigger and much more dramatic, I guess? It was interesting when we were chatting, because I know you as Meadows, and you mentioned you've got a new area of work, which luckily dovetails with work that we do, and supports a new appeal and some new projects that are coming through. So do you want to tell us about the next evocative space that you've tapped into?
Complete coincidence, although I think these things go round on the interweb, don't they? So but painting Plantlife, I'm never short of subject matter. I'm just I find a habitat and paint it. Nature does it for me. I never stuck for composition, but I follow a few botanists on Twitter. I can recommend this thing on Sunday evenings, 8 till 9 o'clock. It's called Wildflower Hour. And you'll meet some, the knowledge that some of these botanists have. I'm absolutely in awe of them. Anyway, they actually provided me with quite a few images for my Paint My Meadow campaign last year. And recently there have been tweets about temperate rainforests. So that's where I picked up on it. And, you know, they're not far-flung exotic places. These are our very own local rainforests, you know, here in the UK. And of course, I mean, much of the British Isles would have been covered in this kind of habitat at one time. And I have known about them from way back because ecology was actually part of my degree. And I visited a couple. They're so beautiful. They're so lush. You've got the mosses and the lichens and the ferns that grow on them. To me, they're just shouting out, "Come and paint me." So I was planning to go to some tropical forests further afield, but now I think, well, I can stay in the UK. I don't have to fly, and I'm going to go to some in the southwest. One of your contacts, Jules, and then hopefully maybe one in Scotland, and get some material there and start a new series of work. I can't wait. I'm so excited about it. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about them, Jules.
Yes, so as you said, if you say a British rainforest, most people look a bit dumbfounded, but they're down the west coast, so Scotland, southwest Wales, as you've said, and they are incredibly rare, and through a number of reasons, including sort of loss of people using woods as livelihoods, loss of grazing, changing management practices, they're at real risk, which is why we do quite a lot of work in them, and predominantly it is encouraging the landowners to manage them in certain ways and to appreciate what we've got before we lose them. So we've got work currently in the southwest, which you're going to go out with Rachel and have a look at. We've got some new rainforest projects in Scotland, which hopefully will get you up to there, and we'll have some in Wales coming through as well. But we've got a big appeal that launches tomorrow for our rainforest work, and it's really to help kickstart some of the new work that we want to do, which includes training up landowners, but also young people, to get them involved to understand why they're so important. So it launches tomorrow on a website called The Big Give, and for the first week, donations that come in can be matched, so they can be doubled. So we're encouraging people, if they want to find out more about rainforests, go and have a look at the Big Give website, or come to our website, find out a little bit more. And if you'd like to get involved, then you've got the opportunity to get your donation matched for a week, which we think is amazing, and that's through some wonderful supporters of ours. But yes, it's an amazing coincidence. I think we couldn't have done that if we tried, quite frankly, could we? So kindly, yes, there's the website there for coming to Plantlife. You can find out all about the temperate rainforest. You can find out more about meadows. You can find out more about us. But yes, I've been asked to say a little bit more about Plantlife. It's an amazing charity. The work they do is critical and it's vital. We talked about the meadows, and in those first 2 years, really, it felt like a massive sense of urgency to try and get these meadows before they were ploughed up and gone for good. So that's really where they started with, it needs to be land that's protected. As I said, it was mainly due to modernisation of farming, which is not a fault of the farming community. It was something that was seen as progress at the time, and now we're looking at land use quite differently. So they were being ploughed up, they were being seeded, the chemicals were coming in, and we were seeing the landscape changing really quite dramatically. So we've ended up now with 23 reserves that are across the UK. Lots of them are these fragments of the old farms, but as I said, we've got places as diverse as the peat bogs, and we've got all sorts of weird and wonderful little pockets of lands, and they were all incredibly different, and we'd love people to go out and visit them and find them special for their own reasons. Management's obviously really important to us, so we can't neglect these sites because they will become totally wild, and that's not what they are. These are managed through livestock intervention. So especially the meadows, if we didn't, for example, get the livestock on there and do the grazing, they'd be overrun with the brambles and the hawthorns and the trees, and essentially they would turn back into a forest again, which forests are lovely, but meadows do need to play the part within the biodiversity of the country to support all the wildlife. There are certain bees, butterflies, animals that need certain plants in order to breed or to feed, and we do need to protect them all as much as we can. So we work really closely with tenant farmers. We have contractors that come onto our land to support us, but more and more we're doing work with people with their own land, or people who are managing land, whether that's a local council or a school, a local parish council. It could be a company, to look at what land holdings they've got and how they can manage them better for wildflowers and ultimately for the wildlife that it supports. So that's where a lot of our work now is heading towards. And we only really can do this through our members, who many of us have been with us for 30 years now. They won't like me saying that because it potentially shows their age, some of them. But also our supporters, you know, we work with companies, we work with individuals who get involved with us, and as well as people like the lottery who get involved and help us through our work. But we really love ultimately people to go out and just connect with these spaces and understand why they are so special and why we really need to keep them, rather than allowing them to fall into disrepair. So I thought I'd just chat about a couple of the reserves that you have you've painted for us, Elaine, because they are just so beautiful. And if we had more office space, we would have them on our walls, but we're a tiny organisation and most of us work at home anyway, even without the lockdown. But yeah, so we might have to have some smaller ones. The first one, I always have to think about how I pronounce this because my Welsh is not very good. So I apologise to any Welsh speakers in the audience. So it's Cae Blaen Dethran, which is a small site. It's only 10 acres and it's in Carmarthenshire. We've got a picture coming up of it. It's a really species rich grassland. It's just beautiful. Just to look at the photograph, let alone being there. So it's on a slope. We've got this grassland dominating the upper area of it, but on the lower area it's quite marshy. So we've got two quite different habitats within this really quite small space, which makes it really valuable. And we've got butterfly orchids that you can see in the picture. We also have both types. We have the lesser and the greater, which is quite rare to have them both on one site. And in a good year, we can actually get thousands of them just in this 10-acre site, which is a sign that it's a really good managed site. And we talked about the animals that are benefiting from the wildflowers. So here we have the food source for the marsh fritillary butterfly. So if they don't have their food source or their breeding source, they start dying out as well. And then you kind of have that domino effect where we're losing them all. And we work with a neighbouring farmer who grazes this land for us. Ranscombe Farm I mentioned, which is in Kent. It's slap bang next to a motorway, so it's very accessible to get to, and that is actually a working farm. We have a tenant farmer on there. It's on the North Downs, and it is a site of special scientific interest. You mentioned the poppies which you've painted, which are just glorious when they come in sort of the June, July time. It's much bigger. It's 560 acres, so significantly more. It's full of footpaths that people can explore, to come and have a look. And interestingly, we have farmland, but we also have woodland on the site as well. So we've got some really amazing different habitat spaces there. And so you get the different varieties on the site, along with beautiful dormice. I love dormice and they're so incredibly rare. So we have dormice on site. And then you mentioned Jones Hill Farm, which is one of our favourites. We love Jones Hill Farm. That's 14 different meadows that are surrounded by hedgerows. So you get the two amazing habitat sources that are next door to each other. You mentioned about the spotted orchids, but we have green-winged orchids there. We have meadow saffron, we have milkwort, all these plants that have this really evocative name. So come to our website, go to the interactive map, have a look and see where our reserves are, but equally look where your local meadows might be that are in the ownership of someone else. And just to say, if you'd like to get involved with this, many ways we've mentioned. You can make a donation, you can become a member, you can do no mow May and not mow your lawn, you can sign the road verge petition and encourage your local council to manage their road verges differently if they're not already moving in that direction, and many of them are, which is absolutely brilliant. You can come out to one of reserves, or why not find your local wildplant group. There's them springing up literally all over the place as the wildflowers do. Get involved in local campaigns, or as we said, you can plant up your garden with wildflowers. So there's lots of different things that you can do, which pick your wildflower and just go for it, quite frankly. So we'd just like to say thank you to Elaine for all your amazing support. It's been brilliant, and we love working with you, and many years we hope to be working with you still. And thank you to the North Wall as well for the opportunity to get involved, and we will manage to come over and see you as restrictions start lifting, and we really look forward to seeing the exhibition and when it's actually physical, finally, after all this time. So thank you, and yes, just go out and seek those wildflowers, and yeah, they'll make you happy.
Thank you so much, both. It's obvious how happy it makes you to be painting and every day thinking about meadows and just being part of that world. It's wonderful to hear how enthusiastic and passionate you both are about your respective fields. Everybody, we're going to take a quick break. Please submit some more questions in the chat, not in the chat, in the Q&A box. We're going to run the slideshow just so that you can get up and stretch your legs, and we'll be back with you in a minute. I hope everybody's back. I see we still have most of the attendees, which is great. Thank you for staying with us for the Q&A session. Elaine and Jules, ready to answer some questions. Jules, there were a couple from Margaret Power. Her first question was, does your charity work nationally?
Yes, we do. So at the moment we are in England, Wales and Scotland. Unfortunately not in Northern Ireland, but watch this space. Plantlife in the past did quite a lot internationally, and we're just revisiting where we get involved. So we will be expanding our operations, but yes, at the moment we are in the three nations of England, Wales and Scotland.
Great. And Margaret also had a comment talking geographically. She said that when she drives through France, she sees that in the farmlands there, that there's far more wildflower meadows or wildflowers. And she wondered whether that's anything to do with using less chemicals.
It's a mixture. So interesting, I saw that comment, and we actually have funding coming in from Laurent Perrier, who have vineyards in France. And so I've been chatting to them about the management in France, and it's a mixed bag. Their farming didn't become as intensive as ours, and ours is directly related to World War II, when obviously as an island nation we were needing to feed ourselves, and that's really where the industrialization started from, and France wasn't quite in the same position. But yes, they generally have been moving in slightly different direction to us in terms of use of pesticides, herbicides. Their management practices are slightly different to ours, and we've been a little bit more intensive, and that's why when you can go to different countries it does look different, but we are hopefully moving in that right direction, but we just need people to be championing it and saying this is what we want and this is the direction that we want our landscapes and our farming to go in.
Great. Elaine, I guess I've always wanted to ask you this, and that's short of me actually coming with you on a painting trip, which one day I would love to do. I've seen lots of the short films that you have, you're sketching in a blustery landscape and you can hear the wind in the trees, and there you are doing a quick sketch. Obviously you work from photographs as well, but can you just put us in the landscape with you where you're trying to really capture that scene, that meadow, that, whatever it is, and what you've got with you, and what the best way that you feel is to really do that when you're on plein air?
Well, I mean, I wish that I had an entourage with me to go out sketching you know, to make a fantastically big painting outside, because you know, I mean, but I don't have you know, David Hockney's sorry, I'm moving this backup team, because he takes out great trucks with lots of cameras and things like that, and you know, it would become an expedition. So generally it's me with a small sketchbook and a camera and come back to the studio. But I do work outdoors. There's nothing like it for capturing the atmosphere, but I think what I mainly do is I'm out there sort of absorbing the atmosphere, getting the feel of it, and I try to then represent it. I mean, the painting behind me is actually from a photograph which was sent to me by somebody. So I've never, although it's Bunny Woods in Nottinghamshire, I've never actually been to that wood in autumn. She sent some of the most fantastic atmospheric photographs, and I was able to work from that. So I know what it feels like to be in a wood in autumn, you know, and I can kind of extrapolate from that. But I do take lots of stuff out with me, and you know, it's a case of where I can get to without having to expend a lot of energy, without too much driving and that sort of thing. So that's how I work it, really.
I mean, your colors are obviously so amplified in your paintings. I mean, I just can't wait for the gallery show, that I feel we'll be surrounded by this absolute celebration of the abundance and glory of nature. I mean, and you know, obviously those aren't necessarily the colors, you know, exact colors of the landscape. They might have been a bit more muted, but of what it feels to me is that's the way you're conveying, I think, part of your excitement and your feeling of being in that landscape is to put that into then the colors that you choose for the painting.
You're right. But of course, I mean, nature can be very exuberant. I mean, it can be very gaudy. So there are quite a lot of very bright colors. I do use some fluorescent paint in my in a lot of my meadow paintings. That's acrylic painting, which I put underneath, because I want to show you know, how riotous the whole thing can be. So yeah, I use all kinds of colors.
Wonderful. And there was a question from Olivia, who lives in a place, I'm not sure where, and they have very rich soil there. So she's asking, Jules, for your advice on flower seeds for a fertile floodplain, unlike the poor soils that maybe, you know, wildflowers could be more used to.
Sure. Well, we work in partnership with lots of people who have these floodplain meadows, and yes, they're quite rich just by the nature of obviously their flooding. So you've got two options. One is try and find a local floodplain meadow and ask if you can use some of their seeds. So when they get their green hay off, are they happy to donate it? And then you can literally use that seed, and then that is the local things that grow locally that like those local conditions. However, you can buy seed mixes for floodplains as well. So I did a quick look to see if anyone's got one straight away. You've got Gate, who are quite a big seed supplier that we work with, and we know I'm not kind of advocating just them, but they do have a special floodplain mix as well. So the kind of things you'd be looking at, Meadow Sweet really loves its kind of damp conditions. You've got things like Bulbous Buttercup would like it, Self Heal, you've got Medic. So there's quite a long list of things that actually would love those conditions. What you can do, as I said, go and have a look at Gate or at Plantlife. We do have advice and advisory, so you're welcome to come and drop an email into inquiries@plantlife.org.uk, and we can make recommendations on the kind of things that you might want to put into your floodplain. But yes, that Gate mix has got a really nice list of all the things that pretty much would like your conditions.
Thank you, Jules. There's a question for you as well, and then I'll go back to Elaine. Someone's asking, are there any meadows with orange hawkweed in Oxfordshire, or where could I buy this?
Oh, I wouldn't know personally. I'm over in the east of England, so my meadows look very different to those in Oxfordshire. We've got very different conditions because we don't get anywhere near the amount of rain that you do, and we're very dry over here. Again, I could probably find out for you from colleagues if there's anywhere specifically that has that. You should be able to get it as a single seed from someone like Emilsgate, or John Chambers Wildflowers is also a really good source. If you get stuck, again, just drop us an email and I'm sure we can give you a steer towards perhaps other suppliers who might have quite the specialist seed that you're looking for.
Great, thank you. Elaine, Margaret Power, who'd asked some questions earlier, she was saying, I mean, I know you do teach, because I remember one of the first times I came across your work was actually when you'd taken that studio space on St. Giles, and you had amazing paintings in the window that was on both, well, it sort of covered two corners of the street, and
church, yeah.
It was just so hard to miss because your paintings were in the window, and from there you were doing a summer of teaching people. A friend of mine still is having some online teaching with you, I know. And anyway, Margaret's asking if you ever teach in open air settings.
Not so far. Again, you know, it's so weather dependent that if you're going to plan a workshop, you need to guarantee the weather, and so I wouldn't see how you could actually manage that. I could certainly do, and I am planning some workshops for this summer. Could certainly do painting days where, if it's fine, we can go out, because I've now got this place in Charlbury, and I'll have to find places that would be potential sketching spots. But it is quite a time-consuming thing. You know, you have to set yourself up. You have to you need sketching easels. Although you could just take a drawing pad, I suppose, but to paint outside is it needs a fair amount of equipment. I mean, some people do actually have this equipment. Somebody came to one of my workshops with a beautiful sketching. It was a sort of case, and it opened out, and it, you know, sort of grew legs and things and became an easel, and it was wonderful. It cost an absolute fortune. I mean, I don't have anything as sophisticated as that, but so yeah, I do get requests for teaching, and I do run some classes. I'm doing a bit of Zoom teaching at the moment, which is new thing. It's working out quite well. But generally it's a bit studio based because of the practicalities of it.
Thank you. Diana's asked, well, it's a comment really. Diana's an artist we work with as well, again in a lovely protracted way for us. She was due to have a show with us last year. It's now going to be in September, or this year, and then it's going to be September. And she's written, I have been thinking about habitats that support wildflowers from year to year, but that are not managed in any way, no mowing or grazing. There is an area near me that is flooded in the winter, but then supports a beautiful area of ragged robin. I don't know ragged robin. I mean, Jules, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and some places do seem to sort of just manage on their own without human intervention, but it may well be that that's not right for every site, which is why we, you know, grazing is part of a conservation management program, and it's to keep those thuggish plants down. But if a site is managing on its own without humans intervening, then leave it alone. And likewise, for example, with a road verge, don't just assume that you need to go and seed it, because actually it could manage on its own if it just was not touched by the mowers. So it's one of those situations. But something like a meadow does need intervention because it's a man-made created habitat by the farming process. But floodplains are beautiful and very undervalued, I think, really. We definitely shouldn't be building on them.
Oh, we have a lot around here. They're always flooding. As you say, we have a lot of rain.
We don't have much in the east.
Elaine, I'm going to, the last question is for you, and then I'm sure everybody's got dinner or something to get on with. The person writes, Elaine, in regards to the Paint My Meadow series, when you painted directly from people's photographs, so obviously they weren't places you'd necessarily been to, as you said in the talk, you know, somebody sent you one from Australia, and you painted that. How was the experience different? Because we were talking about how much you otherwise immerse yourself in the places that you paint.
Well, partly it's the quality of the photograph. Some photographs, as I say, the photograph that I used several photographs actually that I used for Bunny Woods in Autumn was just such a lovely bright sharp autumn day that I did get the sense of being in the woods. So but I work from a combination of photographs, going out there, seeing these things, and I sort of, the thing is, it's not about a literal interpretation. They're not botanical illustrations. It's about the feel of the place, and I do have a sense of it. You know, I mean, I painted meadows in Italy. Talk about French meadows not being managed so well. I mean, some of the meadows in northern Italy are fantastic. You know, full of bird's foot trefoil and things like that. So actually. Getting a sense of the place and knowing how I can use my kind of repertoire of sort of brushstrokes and things to capture that. That's how I work, really. As long as I can get that feeling into the work, I don't mind how I do it.
Wonderful. Well, keep painting is all I'd say. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, and it was wonderful to listen to you both. And as I say, your enthusiasm is incredibly infectious and really makes me quite impatient for the show at the North Wall. Your painting, Elaine, and really the celebration of the work of Plantlife evident on the walls of the gallery. If I could just say to people who are with us, please do, midday tomorrow, the Big Give is live, and please do support Plantlife when that goes live. If you've enjoyed tonight and would like to do more for Wildflower Meadows, and please do come to the North Wall. We were sad not to open on the 1st of May for Art Weeks, but as an art centre, we had to wait till the 17th. So Elaine's got 8 days in the gallery, and we would just love to see you all there. 8 days. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a good evening.
Thank you. It's been lovely.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.